that have been a part of these for a while, typically our December one is a recap just of the year and takeaways and things of that nature. We're going to talk a little bit about that because we've got people that attend on as panelists that attend several different roundtables in different markets. And so I'd like for them to share takeaways and the differences in conversations. It's very interesting how we have a lot of the same topics, but we get different perspectives and different points of view from the different markets. So I want to share a little bit about that. We also wanted to loop in, because we haven't done it on this roundtable yet, wanted to talk a little bit about just the general state of affairs for small to mid-sized companies, what we're seeing out in the economy, share some points and observations from the group on what we've seen, and a little bit about expectations into next year. In January, we will do a hot topics for small and mid-sized companies, and that will talk about predictions for 23 and what everybody's expectations are. But we'll touch on that a little bit in this one. So what I'd like to start off with is just a couple of talking points. So a very big part, a very great source of information that we've been using for several years now is a report that the NFIB, the National Federation of Independent Businesses, puts out. And it's a small business optimism index report. They call it, now they call it the Small Business Economic Trends. And I would certainly recommend that those of you who are interested in what is going on with small businesses or small to mid-sized companies to check out the NFIB's website. They typically put a new report out on a monthly basis, and it's typically towards the middle of the month for the preceding month. And they have a lot of metrics that they track. So it's always good to get, because they have 5, 10, sometimes 15,000 participants from all in the survey from all over the country. So it gives you a good general feel of what the country as a whole is doing, what the economy, the U.S. economy as a whole is doing for basically your companies on Main Street. And then we typically draw some comparisons in the different markets from those observations. And it's amazing how they typically line up. So and we'll talk a little bit more about this at the roundtable in January, but I do want to go over a few things, a few observations from the November report that they put out. I think it was a November report. Let's see, they put this out, they don't have a date on it. So in October, I'm sorry, this is their October report. So the thing, and this is really what I feel is a real good indicator of where the economy in general is going, is their metric on small business optimism. And as those of you that have attended roundtables where we've talked about this over the course of the last 12 months, optimism is pretty low, and optimism is continuing to decline. They rate it on a scale of usually about 1 to 100 or about 105. And this is the 10th consecutive month that it's been below their 49-year average of 98. And their optimism index is at 91. So there is not a lot of...
This thing has speakers, right?
Yeah, can you hear us, Shane?
I got no volume.
Okay.
We can hear Shane, but he can't hear us.
Yeah, we can hear Shane, but he can't. Okay, he muted himself, so he's good to go.
We
turn
only
the
see
volume.
the top of your head.
Yeah, somebody send Shane a note that says, "Hey, turn your volume up."
He's getting it.
So, all right. So getting back to this, so optimism remains low, and I think that is a characteristic of the market as a whole. But I don't think it necessarily applies to most of us here in Texas. I think that the people here in Texas, just simply because of our economic situation and plus our tie into with oil and gas, the outlook for oil and gas is extremely positive for 23. And oil and gas has been strong ever since we pulled out of the COVID-induced downturn. So I think that is really driving optimism among our participants a lot higher. And the people that we're talking to really are excited about what's coming up in the coming year. But I think as an economy as a whole, I think there were a lot of things that were creating economic headwinds before, and there are even more things now that are going to be creating economic headwinds. So that's certainly driving optimism. Driving optimism down, excuse me. So a couple of other things. The biggest issue that's affecting small and mid-sized companies used to be a shortage of labor. Now that's moved down to second place. Now it's inflation. And how do you manage inflation? How do you manage inflation through the wages that you pay? How do you manage inflation through the cost of the materials that you need and raw material cost? How do you manage inflation through the cost of doing business? The cost of doing business is going up significantly. Now, granted, in an inflationary economy, we do have the opportunity to raise prices, but there is that fine line that especially smaller companies have to walk between raising prices too much and raising prices and staying competitive, because you certainly have to stay competitive. So that is a tightrope that I think businesses are going to continue to have to walk, and it's certainly something that was prevalent in 2022. Labor markets, it is what it is. Raise your hand on this call if you're having difficulty hiring people. Everybody's having difficulty hiring people in some form or fashion. So that's a problem that was a problem before COVID. It's been exacerbated since the COVID downturns. So it's a huge issue. Mike, you got something to say about that?
Just raise my hand. As you requested, I raised my hand.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, thank you for raising your hand, Mike. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I should have done it on the video, huh?
Well, see, and I think, Mike, I mean, it typically we've seen on our end at least a little loosening on what you would call the white collar side. So your professionals, your finance people, your accounting people, your project managers, your senior level people. We've seen some issues with that, but we've been able to work around those. But the real issue that's affecting companies like the companies on this call.
Hear me, but I should be able to hear him.
Yeah, we can still hear you, Shane. So the real issue that is affecting people on this call is the blue collar issue. Mike, I know you've got a sizable shop and you hire a lot of people. I mean, what have you guys been seeing? Are you seeing it easing? Are you seeing it getting worse, staying about the same as it's been over the course of the year?
I think it's gotten worse. Labor's hard to find, parts are hard to find. And then just from talking to people in different industries, I didn't know it was so widespread. It doesn't matter whether it used to be. I thought it was just truck drivers and mechanics, and then it became construction workers, and then it reaches. I think nobody's exempt from labor shortages. All industries are hit. From the people
I would agree with that. And this has been driven by years and years of us not educating people to work these jobs, not educating enough people to work these jobs, and that has again been exacerbated by COVID. And I think that you're going to see a shift, at least a little bit of a shift in this, because a lot of larger companies that had money, they went and hired up a bunch of these people because they were facing shortages as well. So they hired a bunch of people, they paid them good wages, and they went to work for them. And then what is eventually going to end up happening is those companies are going to start laying off as we start moving into more of a recessionary economy, and those jobs are going to start shifting back to some of the smaller companies. So I think you're going to see some easing in 23, but it's still going to become a problem, and it's going to become a problem, or it's going to be a problem for the foreseeable future. So thank you for that, Mike. So labor shortages, big deal. One thing that I think is a very interesting metric is capital spending. And this is companies that are expanding facilities. These are companies that are buying new equipment. And capital spending throughout this has remained pretty decent, really. And I think that's been a good indicator of how strong small to mid-sized companies are, because 54% of the respondents to this survey, and this is a sample of 10,000 businesses for this particular month, had reported some type of capital expenditure in the last 6 months, and 23% planned capital outlays in the next few months, and that's trickling down a little bit. So what that means is that companies are expanding facilities because either they anticipate business is going to grow or they need the extra capacity. They're buying new equipment, and whether that is to automate certain processes that they can't hire people for, or whether it's because their business is expanding because they picked up market share from surviving the pandemic downturn, then in the pandemic shutdowns, remains to be seen. It doesn't really dig deep into that, but I think it's a very positive trend that capital spending throughout all of this has remained high. Now we'll see as we get into 23, where people are really anticipating they're going to be dealing with a recession. We'll see where capital spending goes once we get to that point. I think where everybody agrees that the economy is physically in a recession. A couple of other things. The amount of respondents that are reporting higher sales in the last 3 months was a net negative 8%. So that is not a good thing. The net percentage of owners that are expecting higher sales volumes in the coming months is a net negative 13%. And both of those metrics continue to decline. So I think that really goes to show you that companies are really starting to see effects of a downturn in the economy. So that's going to be an interesting metric to track when we talk about have this economic conversation in January, and we have this conversation again in June, halfway through the year. One thing is that 44% of the respondents are raising compensation. And this is one interesting thing with small to mid-sized companies, is that increases in compensation have remained high. This was pre-pandemic, this is during pandemic, and this is post-pandemic. Now, whether that is a result of smaller companies thinking that they have to pay more in order to attract talent, whether this was just generally companies doing well and rewarding their employees for additional wage increases, we don't know. They don't really dig into that numbers. But one thing is that wage growth with small to mid-sized companies has continued to be robust. A couple other points: credit markets. A small percentage is reporting that their borrowing needs are met. They are, or were not satisfied. I'm sorry. A small percentage is reporting their borrowing needs are not satisfied. There is a decent amount, about a quarter, a little over a quarter, reported that their credit needs are met, but 62% say they were not interested in a loan. And I think that I've always had some questions about the NFIB and how they do how they review credit markets. So does it mean, what does it mean when it says your credit needs are met? Do you not need credit? Do you need credit? One of the things that they don't dig too much into is how difficult it is to get the loans that they need. So obviously people are paying higher rates on things. Only 28% of the respondents reported borrowing on a regular basis. So I think it may be an indication of there's certainly opportunity for growth in the commercial loan space when you talk about small to mid-sized companies, because it's always seen, no matter what was going on, no matter what situation the economy is in, that there was a significant number of respondents, at least to this survey, that said they weren't having difficulty getting loans. They had the loans that they need. They had the working capital that they need. And I find we probably need to dig more into that. Brian, do you have any insights, being the banker on the call? Do you have any insights into what you guys are seeing? And obviously you guys are out in Odessa. You guys are experiencing very good growth out there. But what are your thoughts on this?
Well, overall, right now, I would say this: that what I've seen particularly, and I'll kind of speak, to my direct experience, and then kind of expound to what I've seen in general, is I've seen just an explosion in the amount of I think, put borrowers or potential prospects seeking through the, credit through the SBA. Excuse me, my voice is I've been a little ill the last few days. Through the SBA side, I've taken over 500 applications that have come in the past 6 months. That we haven't accepted them all, but seen 500. I've seen probably about 525 applications come through since May the 1st. Through the SBA portal. And so we have plenty. I think that there is still, I think borrowers are struggling to have their credit needs met. Our strong borrowers are still borrowing. I had 2 requests yesterday alone just for individuals that were just trying to get some capital expenditures before the year ended. But I would say overall, people are somewhat struggling to, I think we're not extremely conservative at West Texas National Bank, but we are somewhat, and I think that there's a lot. I still think that there's more potential borrowers and prospects out there struggling to have their credit needs met.
Yeah, and I would agree with that because we see a lot of that as well. I mean, we see a lot of companies that are having difficulty just meeting the reporting requirements that are associated with getting loans, and that's a very, very prevalent issue. And looking at the NFIB survey, their respondents only said 6% of them said it was harder to get their last loan than the previous one. And like I said, I think I'd be real interested to dig more, or at least if they would dig more into those numbers, because now I know that you still have people out there that still have some pandemic cash lying around. I mean, the PPP's been run through, but you have a lot of companies that got the EIDLs. Now, even though that is ended, and it ended more than 6 months ago, but companies are still flushed with some of that cash. You have the employee retention credits that are coming in. Those are very lucrative for a lot of companies. So I understand how companies can still have things coming in. And I think also a lot of smaller businesses, with what went on with the PPP and with the EIDL, are a lot more aware of the SBA and SBA products, and they're going after those a lot more. But I mean, Brian, I mean, those loans may be easier to get. They may not be easier to get depending on what's going on.
They're not necessarily easier to get, and people are miseducated about PPP is what my experience is right now. About the SBA, because they associate it with being PPP and EIDL, and and so like I said, I think as a result of the rollout of those 2 programs, including the employee retention program, I think people have become far more acclimated and comfortable in pursuing SBA loan requests, but they don't actually understand that at this point they're entering the SBA 7A and 504 programs that have been around for well over 50 years. And those are not necessarily easier they're not real. Actually, frankly, they're not as easy to get as the PPP loans, because I mean, people really don't understand the process, that the SBA is not a bank, and that the programs that rolled out, in 2020 and 21 were government sponsored. But whereas the SBA 504 and 7A, those really fall back upon the institutions that are sanctioned to issue sanctioned with those programs, and a good portion of the decision making is still decided by the institution as to whether or not those loans would get approved or not. The SBA and the 504 and the 7A program provide, as the guarantee percentages on those 2 loans, and it takes some of the pressure off the bank, but at the same time you still have to fit within lending policy, and so and this just may be my direct experience where I'm at, is we still have, we still like to see cash flow, and we still we still want to see a fully collateralized loan. We're still looking for businesses that have been open at least 2 years. And of course, the COVID year, the 2020, we provide some measure of, leniency on, of course, but we're still looking for companies that can demonstrate that they've been able to cash flow throughout the past 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, and that's another wrinkle to this is what do a company's financial statements look like from 2020 and 2021? And some of them look very good. I mean, some of them had, excuse me, some companies had extremely good years. Most companies had extremely bad years. So it's a mixed bag, and I think that's been a difficult thing for lenders to wade through. Is okay. Well, you had a bad 20, you had a bad 21, but you're still someone that we can work with your requirements on to get you a loan. So I think there are a lot of different factors associated with the going out and getting loans. And another thing that it doesn't talk about, and this doesn't really specify if the types of financing that these companies are getting, if they are coming from traditional lenders or they're coming from other lenders. If these are traditional loans and traditional lines of credit through what we would consider a bank, or if there are some types of other alternate financing through other institutions. So it could be factoring, it could be any other types of third party financing. So that we don't know, and so there are a lot, like I said, there are a lot of things that I think are in between these numbers that personally I would like to know a little bit more about as it relate to our financing needs met. Couple of other little things here. So just in general, we know that we got third quarter real GDP numbers, and there was 2.6% of growth. However, that was because of 2.8 points of growth related to exports. So essentially everything else was negative. And for the year, I mean, you've got 2 negative quarters to start off with. You've got really essentially a boosted third quarter that is a small loss or no growth whatsoever. So really, I mean, again, I think after the first of the year, you're going to start hearing a lot more of the recession talk. I think a lot of people are convinced that we're already in a recession. I would tend to agree with that, because I think you're seeing not just a lot of that sentiment, but you're seeing a lot of data that supports that. One thing is, though, that consumer spending remains solid. People have savings, people have credit, they still have those. So people are going out and continuing to spend money. But that has been something that has always been prevalent within our economy here in the United States. Everybody remembers the downturn in 2008, 2009, the Great Recession. And coming out of the Great Recession, one of the things that the Fed wanted to do was they had inflation targets up to 10%. Because they thought that was going to ease the recovery. But the problem that they ran into with that, and inflation really didn't increase much during that recovery, was because consumer markets remained so strong and so competitive. So margins decreased, but prices really didn't go up because the markets remained so competitive. So I think that's just really a hallmark of the U.S. economy, and I know that the Fed is trying to slow that down. But even with the 7, now I think going on 8 rate hikes that they've done so far, that it seems like inflation is leveling off. But I think inflation is leveling off because of other factors, not necessarily because of monetary policy. And I think there are a lot of people that would agree with that. So that's a very interesting statistic. Now we'll have to see what consumer spending does going into 2023, because really the effects of these rate hikes are postponed a few months while credit card companies raise rates and other companies raise rates. And the credit card companies don't raise your interest rates immediately the day after the Fed announces a rate hike. So they raise the rates, but then it's on new money that you spend. And so the old money that you have outstanding, those interest rates are still the same. So it's going to be interesting to see how that starts affecting people into 2023. It doesn't really cool down consumer spending, but do we really need to cool down consumer spending? So that's going to be something that only time will tell. Just all in all, the NFIB, really their thoughts are they're rough times ahead. at least what they are anticipating. So I would partially agree with that. I would partially disagree with that. Like I said, I think we're fortunate here in Texas. We have a lot of job growth. We have a lot of business moving to Texas. We have a lot of benefits from the oil and gas industry, which budgets have already been set. Everything's looking good for 2023. I know our friends out in West Texas, Brian, Jaime, you guys are very optimistic about what's going on out there. Everybody is. Some people are even amazed at the amount of money that they're making out there. So I think things are certainly looking good. And I think oil and gas is being up is certainly going to dull the effects of any recession here. So I would expect to see a divergence from what is being reported nationwide to what we're experiencing here in our markets across Texas. So what I'd like to talk about, and I'd like to put this out to the group, I'll get done talking, but what I'd like to put out to the group is, as we went through 2022, we faced a lot of different challenges, and I listed a few of them that I would like for us to just talk a little bit about. How do we address these? How are we planning to address them? Did we face them, and were they very influential on our business? So just like to get some insights from the group on this. And the first one that I'd like to start off with, and I'm going through them in order of importance, is inflation. So how has inflation really been affecting our businesses and our ability to conduct businesses? And what are some things that we've been doing to counter that? Who wants to go first? Go ahead, Mike.
I think as the prices, all of our costs are going up, you got to be cognizant of that and make sure that you're keeping up with the increases. As you mentioned earlier about the pay is going up. I think it's a matter of, with the labor shortage, if you don't compensate your staff appropriately, you're not going to have staff. You're going to be shorthanded, and the other people are going to be stealing them from you. So, the labor shortage has created a cost increase, and then materials. Even our accounting has gone up twice since COVID. So that they just make sure you're watching your margins.
Yeah, and your last comment was exactly what I was going to say, is that we have to be very cognizant of our margins, and we really, first of all, have to be good at tracking our margins. So we have to understand what our real gross margins are, what's an industry standard, and what's acceptable for our business to be able, because not only do we have to make margins, and margins are shrinking because certain prices are going up. Price of labor is going up, especially when labor is considered a direct cost in your business, but also the price of raw materials. And they've settled down a little bit from COVID peaks, but they're still high. And availability or lack thereof is certainly driving prices up as well. So how do those affect those gross margins, and what gross margins do we need to cover our overhead? Because like you have labor issues on your direct cost side, you have labor issues on your administrative side and your overhead side. And it's certainly something that businesses need to be cognizant of, because you can't just raise prices correspondingly. You have to still remain competitive. So that's going to be something that is going to have to be closely managed. It's had to be closely managed throughout this whole situation that we've been going through over the course of the last 2 going on 3 years. But it's something that we're, especially as we grow, which I think most of the companies on this in this meeting are primed for growth. As we grow, we're certainly going to have to be even more cognizant of it, because we don't want to get to a situation where we grow ourselves out of business. So I think you addressed a couple of things there. Who else has a comment to make on managing inflation, or how it's been affecting your business, or what you've been doing with it? Go ahead, Rand.
Well, obviously we trying to stay competitive with our wages, and so those have gone up as far as salaries. And I think the big thing for us going into 2023, as we kind of tiptoe into what looks like a big growth year, is extending our lead times. So really pushing back how quickly we're onboarding clients, in case we start to lose clients. We can speed that up a little bit, but if we start to gain a tremendous amount of clients, that we do have time to get competitive and start recruiting. So we're still trying to figure out how to navigate what inflation is going to do to us. But for us, it really is trying to play with how quickly we get clients, and then just in case, how quickly we may lose clients.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Rand, your business is not too dissimilar from ours because you're basically selling people's time and creativity. And those have been some factors that we have had to really consider. And we very closely, I mean, we practice what we preach, and we very, very closely track our margins and manage those very, very carefully. And we've been able to keep margins fairly consistent throughout. And we've just been fortunate there are a lot of factors that have allowed us to do that. And we've been fortunate we've been able to do it. We put an extra strong focus on it. But I agree with your statement is that as you get new business or as you're planning growth, you really have to consider how you're going to manage that and how you're going to manage those people, because getting new customers, new clients onboarded is one thing, but being able to manage the delivery to those clients is another thing. And that's something us personally at Emergent Partners, we spent a lot of time focusing on during the COVID downturns, was putting in place a better structure to manage those projects and really drive delivery a lot more effectively.
Yeah, and the recruitment of subcontractors for us as well, so that if we do grow too quickly, we have kind of, I don't know what you would call a temporary workforce, you know, to be able to backfill some of those things. That's a big part of our strategy as well.
Yeah, and really, we've said it before a lot, and we'll say it again: is creativity is going to win the day. So, whoever is the most creative, whoever creates the most creative solutions, is going to win the day. And we've actually structured a lot of our projects so that we don't need full-time people. So we really don't subcontract, but we're able to pull people into our workforce that wouldn't be in the workforce normally to be able to work on things for us. And that really helps us out. So yeah, thanks for that, Rand. Anybody else? One more about inflation. I mean, it's a big problem. Everybody's dealing with it.
Well, as far as we go, I guess it was mentioned a little bit earlier about consumer spending. You know, we have a lot of regular or, you know, off the street customers walk in and they really don't want to spend that much money, and it kind of draws them away. On the side of the oil field side, it's almost the same way too, though, because some of these oil field companies are hiring their own mechanics to do their own work to save money. The only way we can, or we have been able to become competitive to that, is that their mechanics at their shops get overwhelmed with so much work that they need their trucks today, and that's how we become competitive, by being more efficient and being able to turn around and give their customers their trucks back so they can put them back to work. And that's the reason why we get a lot of that, because we do it efficiently and fast, and it's a good turnaround with that.
Yeah, and I would say that you really need to look at it from the point of view of, well, okay, you can hire your own mechanic and your own mechanic can do this work. And yes, you're going to save money because you don't have to pay me a margin for me to do the work, for me to support your business. But the thing is, though, is that you get certain things by paying for that margin. You get better buying power, better availability of parts. Sometimes you get a quicker, faster turnaround. You get more expertise and better trained expertise. So there are benefits to paying that margin. And I think a lot of people, when they're trying to pinch pennies, they're saying, okay, well, why should I pay somebody extra money to do something? But you really have to consider the benefits of paying that person the extra money to do that.
And that's what happens some of the times. They hire mechanics that aren't very knowledgeable per se, I guess. And when they bring their trucks after they work on them, you know, for us to align them, we have to send them back, and they have to redo a bunch of their work because they didn't do it right the first time.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you really have to consider what the true cost of that was, either to just pay you to do it right the first time, or pay the extra money to do it right the first time, or try to do it on the cheap. And then it ends up costing you more because you have more downtime when that truck is out of service or it's not
Mhm.
operating at full speed. Yeah, Mike, you've got a comment.
What I've seen is that the repair work on those shops where they're trying to do it themselves, they look at that as overhead, and you look at yours as a profit center. So you're investing in people, training, equipment, things they don't have. So you need to make that available to them, and maybe not talk to whoever sent it to you, but talk to the mechanic, get friends with them, to where they know that, hey, look, if you need to use my Mitchell or All-Data or whatever stuff you got, they can come over. You'll help them with that, or let them look at your stuff. They'll be more likely to send you stuff, and you'll be referred to the expert, so they don't look bad, because they don't want to look bad if they're getting paid all that money. And the only reason you see that those guys are hiring those people is so that they can change a light bulb at 4 a.m. or something and get the truck back on the road. Because they don't want to wait until you're open or until you can get to it. So that it's not really and they're not usually, like you said, they're not the best mechanics because they're working with limited resources. So and they don't take into account that they got to pay. They're paying their hourly rate of whatever that is. Then they're paying their retirement. They're paying their health insurance. They're paying whatever the cost of that building is, the lights and the insurance and all that stuff. So I went to a seminar one time where they were preaching, look, you think you're saving money by not vendoring this out, but shit, you don't take into account your whole total cost. And so sometimes you got to make them aware of that, or help the mechanic so he comes to you instead of picking another shop.
Yeah, well, you're exactly right. And it's all about where you stick the number. I mean, basically, and I can allocate a cost as overhead and make it look like my margins are really better than what they are. I can allocate a cost as overhead and not allocate that to a maintenance cost of keeping a piece of equipment out in the field and keeping a piece of equipment operating. I'm like, hey, I'm making good margins. But in reality, I'm not. And that's why it's so important to really and truly understand your margins, because I may overspend in that area, not understanding how that really affects my business or my ability to do business. So that's a good point. Well, thank you all for those comments. So I want to go to the second one now, and we touched a little bit upon this, but labor. And labor shortages. So Mike, you touched on that a little bit. Anybody else want to share anything about difficulties that they've been having with labor shortages? Jaime, I know you're a family business, so you guys haven't really had too much issue with that. I think you're indirectly affected by labor. Mike, you touched on a couple of things. Anybody else have anything they want to share as far as how they have been affected by labor shortages or some things that they're doing?
We've had some real problems finding qualified employee prospects, and I've been able to be pretty flexible the last couple of years, and we've talked a lot about this at our local business forum. But I've been able to be flexible and train people for the position. But there are times that we kind of expand fast enough that I really don't have that luxury, and I need someone who's experienced. And kind of a leftover from COVID, where we've got all these people wanting to work remotely, has turned into there's a real chunk of people who don't ever want to go to an office again. And they, whatever that perceived benefit to them is, whether it's I'm home with my kids, my time's more flexible, I just want to work in my jammies and not go anywhere, whatever that is we've decided it doesn't work that well for our model. And so not only is there the shortage and we can't find people that are trained, but we're still now we're competing against the chunk of people who want to only work remotely.
Yeah, and I think it's going to take a while for that to really cycle out. I mean, remote work certainly creates some advantages, but it also creates some disadvantages. And what's really going to change that is going to be less availability of work from home jobs. But there's still some companies out there that it's a competitive advantage for them, and our work remote jobs, competitive advantage. It's a competitive advantage for us because we can do business anywhere, and our clients don't have to deal with the cost of having somebody on site when they really don't need someone on site. And then obviously it gives us an expansion on where we can find talent and put talent to work. So I would agree with that. But you hit on the very good point. And we talk about the labor shortage in general, but really the big problem is finding qualified talent. That qualified is very important, because a lot of people, they throw out a job posting and they get a ton of people that apply to it. And out of all those people that apply, maybe 0.5% actually have the qualifications that they need. And so that qualified talent, that qualified adjective in there is very, very, very important to this. Rand, go ahead.
Two quick things. We've had some good luck with having hybrid, so that people do have the freedom to be able to be home 1 or 2 days a week, but that they need to be in the office a few days a week, so that they can get genuine connection points with the rest of the team, versus the kind of the connection points they get through social media or the internet, or binge watching, whatever it is. And so that's been really successful for us. And then the other thing that we've been talking about, or a little concerned about, is that over the last 2 years, all of the people that did jump from one job to another to kind of get that pay increase, and now are back into the labor market because they, went to big tech, and then big tech spit them out, aren't the most loyal people. And so that, that loyalty piece is something that, we're definitely on the lookout for as well. And really cautious about, if they've got 2 or 3 jobs that have only been 2 years or less the last 6 years, then we typically stay away from them, especially if they made that big jump and you can see where they, had some sort of an increase in title or pay or whatever that is, and now they're looking again. That's usually a really bad sign for us.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think you're just going to have those people out there from nowadays that are just going to jump from remote job to remote job. And that's just the way that they want to manage their careers. And that's fine. And, we're going to have to compensate for that. I mean, those people may be good employees for a short period of time, and maybe we just assign them tasks and they do those tasks, but we design that in a way where we don't have to have them on board consistently to have continuity. And just deal with that, because that is going to be out there. But the people that you're hiring, the people, when you're hiring people that are going to fit into your company culture, that are going to be bought into what your company is trying to do, those are your long-term people. Those are people that are going to work their way up. But unfortunately, you're just going to have those workers that, in some cases are just going to be, for lack of a better term, transient. They're going to go out and they're going to do their thing, and that's fine. But hey, they gave us some good work. They gave us 6 months of good work, or they gave us good work on this one project. And hey, thank you very much. We appreciate it. But you do what you do, and you do what you want to do, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. What's the term? You do you. So yeah, you do you. Whatever makes you happy, then that's okay. But I'm going to, I'm still going to put you in a position where you're going to help my organization. And if it's a growth benefit for you, that's great. If it's not, then that's up to you. So a couple other points to hit: supply chain and supply chain risk. Mike and Jaime, you guys talked to that. You guys are still having problems getting parts, or has it been consistent? I think, Mike, you mentioned it may be getting a little bit worse. Has it been certain things, or it's just whatever the flavor of the month is, so to speak, that you're having trouble getting?
If it's electronic pieces, it seems to be a problem. Or if it's like, we work on a lot of like big buses and stuff for the medical center, so those aren't on the street everywhere. So we have a hard time finding those components. So there's a lag time or a wait time for some of that.
Yeah, and is that getting better? Is it getting worse, or staying about the same?
What happened is that you ran out of the inventory, so it's gotten worse. And I think it depends on the type of jobs. If you take in jobs that do that, it seems like it's worse. But then you get other jobs that you're flipping, so that you're not having a problem finding parts. So, but overall, I think on the things we're having problems with, and I was at I call on clients that send me business, and so the dealership send me business. I was at a Chevy dealer yesterday, and he said they were down, like more than 50% still because they can't get parts. They
Mhm.
don't have inventory to sell, and they can't get parts for the service department. And car dealers are made their money. Like I think my brother from Deloitte was auditing the car dealership. He said like 85% of their profit came from the service center, and the profit center was the service center was only like 15% of their total revenues. So now they're getting hit no cars and no service.
Yeah. And what do you do in that situation? I mean, you don't have anything to sell, or you don't have anything to complete the service.
Well, they're going to have to be competitive in our market. They're going to have to come after the aftermarket or the same client we're coming after.
Yeah.
Would ultimately affect us. When they got empty bays, they're going to try to fill them up if they're smart.
Yeah,
Somehow.
absolutely. Absolutely. Do you have you been able, has it been easy for you to find alternatives? Maybe instead of OEM part, maybe remanufactured parts or
Or even
aftermarket
used.
parts.
I hate to say, but we're using too much LKQ. I think you get a few defective parts or not the right part, but we're going. If you can't find new, you got to buy something so you get it used.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, after the floods and all that in Louisiana and here, there's a lot of cars that are in the salvage yard.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe a perfectly good part. You were gonna say something, Jaime?
No, I was just agreeing with what he's saying about parts. The quality is not that good. Sometimes aftermarket, it doesn't fit right, and some of that remanufactured stuff it hadn't been remanufactured right. We have trouble with a lot of the steering parts, especially gearboxes that they aren't clocked right when they're remanned, and yeah, we've been going salvage on a lot of stuff ourselves.
Yeah. And it's just a matter of what do you want to do?
That
You want the car to
that
drive?
backs up a lot into our end, because obviously we have clients who have auto insurance claims and they're having to get vehicles repaired, and the parts can't be gotten to repair their vehicles. So they're waiting longer for their repairs to be made. The problem is there's still a little bit of a shortage with rental vehicles. Plus you have a cap on your rental car coverage. So you've really backed this up to where, with inflation being what it is, the rates on rental cars have gone up, but the inventory hasn't gone up. You've got people running out of rental car coverage, and now they're scrambling, trying to figure out, how do I get to and from work if my auto body shop is just telling me, look, I can't get your part for 6 weeks. What are they supposed to do? And you've got upset clients who are already paying more for their rates now because of a number of factors. And it really, puts some downward pressure on, normal everyday people that are just trying to get to work and get around.
I would agree. I mean, who on this call would disagree that shortages, that supply chain shortages are a big driver of what we're seeing with inflation right now?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think everybody would pretty much agree with that. That's why I think a lot of people feel that trying to change monetary policy to drive inflation down, that's why it's been so ineffective. It's going to continue to be ineffective because, like what you described, Denise, it's a trickle down effect. I mean, it is literally if I can't get a part, and a car has to sit in a shop for 6 weeks, and I have to put someone in a rental car. Well, guess what? And I'm having to do that all across the country. Guess what? Premiums are going to have to go up. Rates are going to have to go up. And that, again, drives that inflationary type situation in the economy. I mean, if I have to pay more to get something and then turn around and sell it, and even if I trim my margins, I still have to go up in prices to some degree, and that's going to continue to drive inflation. And then the other thing is that if I am having difficulty hiring people because there's not a lot of qualified talent out there, and I'm using higher wages to compensate for that, well, then guess what? I mean, that drives putting more money in people's pockets, so they have more money to spend, and of course, it drives my overhead up, which means I have to raise my prices. Go ahead, Rand.
Maurice, I'm just wondering if the supply chain issues are going to create pent up demand and kind of stretch out how strong the economy could be. You know, would it delay the recession by chance, or I don't know, at least keep things strong in 2023 because there is such pent up demand?
Well, I think, I mean, my take on this is that there certainly is a lot of pent up demand, and I think that's what's going to drive growth, basically on Main Street with your small and mid-sized, your privately held companies. So I think that pent up demand is going to be a very interesting factor of this either ongoing or upcoming recession. But I don't really see supply chain issues getting any better. I mean, I really, you just don't see a lot out there that indicates the move that a lot of people were talking about towards more local supply chain models. But that's a very, very long-term move. I mean, here we are, we're about to go into the 3-year anniversary of all of the pandemic-related shutdowns. And the first thing people were talking about is like, well, we need to move to more local supply chain models. But even in a 3 to 5 year time frame, it's very hard to move that needle very much because you have to build local manufacturing facilities. You have to have people. You have to have parts. You have to have go through all the red tape that you have to go through. And that takes a very, very long time. And what I'm hoping is that these pressures continue, or these pressures have affected people to the point and affected businesses to the point where they're going to stay on this track, as opposed to things get better and then everybody wants to go right back to what they're doing before and using a more low cost global supply chain model. I think there are a lot of factors that are going to prevent that or slow down people wanting to move back to that, but also the amount of time it's going to take to really move to the local supply chain models, I think is going to it's going to delay the benefits that we could see. But I don't see it changing anytime soon. I don't see things really getting a lot better in 2023, and therefore I just really don't see inflation. I mean, the Fed can raise rates another 20 points, and I just don't think that that's going to drive down inflation, because the cost of things that we have to buy on a daily basis are still going to remain high because of one shortage or another.
I also wonder at some level if that doesn't just make the situation worse. If the monetary policy truly is not going to help make the economy better because of where we're sitting at and what the real problems are, then you're just serving to make cost higher for people who are still just trying to dig out from under and do regular business.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the price of a dozen eggs doesn't necessarily go down because interest rates go up. But the price that you have to pay continues to go up, and then the price that you pay to put those dozen eggs on a credit card, that goes up. And so I think it just increases pressures on people. And yes, it may eliminate some discretionary spending, but at the end of the day, is that really good for the economy? And just like what you saw when rates started to go up, what happened? Housing markets started to cool off, and everybody's like, okay, well, that's a good thing because people aren't buying houses. But the other problem was that, okay, well, they're not paying more for houses, but they're still having to pay more for rent to rent places, because there's no price relief with that, because nothing has happened to drive rent prices down. And in fact, that drives rent prices up because there's more of a demand for
Rents are
rental
outrageous.
properties. So it's really it's all interconnected, but I think it really boils down to less of a monetary policy fix and more of a improving supply chains and improving the logistics, improving the ability for us to manufacture in a situation where we have more control over it, and then improving the ability for us to get it from the manufacturer to the end user. Go ahead, Ren.
Just a quick thing. I was listening to the CEO of Ace. We have a lot of Ace hardware clients around the country, and for them, they're seeing their average ticket price per person go up, which is really great. But they're seeing the number of items that they're buying go down. Obviously that's inflation, right? And so the good part about them, they've been booming because we're a necessary business throughout the pandemic, and they'll continue to sell necessary goods. But they're definitely seeing people are buying specifically things to help preserve their home. They're not buying anything extra. And so a lot of what they're ordering and why they're ordering it, those types of things, are switching towards necessities. And then within those necessities, obviously the price goes up because of the supply chain issues. But it was just a really interesting takeaway for 2023 for them to look just at 2020 and say, okay, well, what was necessary in 2020? And those things will continue to be necessary as our revenue goes up. The number of items we're selling goes down. It's, they don't know when those two things are gonna collide again.
Yeah, and I just think it's going to, I think it's going to create more problems than it's really going to solve, to be honest with you, because again, the driving factors of inflation are not being addressed. And then essentially you put these pressures on people and you slow down the economy in certain areas, and then it ends up slowing everybody down. So now I'm a company, say I'm a company that builds new homes. And I wish Shane was on the call because he could elaborate. He doesn't build new homes, but he does do new construction. But say that I'm a company that builds new homes, and now all of a sudden demand for that has gone down. Well, I have my projects that I've already been contracted to do, but once I do those projects, well, then guess what? My business slows down, and then my business slows down. I have to lay people off, and I've already been hit with lower margins because I've had to pay more for raw materials. I've had to pay my people more. My people have already been hit because their cost of living has gone up, and now they're out of a job. I can't employ them because my section of the market has turned down. Now, I think that whereas that industry would go down, other industries would go up, because I think, again, there is a lot of pent up demand with small and mid-sized companies because they've been spending the majority of the time since the pandemic trying to make do with what they've got. And so they've gotten very good at that, but they still have demand for growth, and they still have demand to try to hire people. And one of the things in the NFIB survey is that I think it's over 3/4 of companies are actively trying to hire and are planning to hire. So small businesses are trying to hire. So I think some of those people could get picked up by some of these other businesses, but it depends on what their skills are. It also depends on what their motivations are. And but even with that, they're still going to have to be paid more. And those companies that maybe their industry is doing well, but they've still had to shrink margins because of raw material cost or of increased labor cost, and they're going to have to continue doing so. And so it just creates this vicious cycle that is just going to drive things down. And I don't think it's going to be very, very good for people. I think, again, we're fortunate where we are, but I still think there are going to be some very tough times for a lot of people. Brian, you've got a point to make.
Well, pardon the question as a panelist, but is this, and I hate to do that. I don't even know if this is productive considering the forum we're in, but is this just kind of a non-contextualized move by the Fed? I'm a banker and I'm sitting here, and obviously I have self-centered reasons to not want them to raise the cost of funds. Totally get it. Mm-hmm. I know that. I'll say that at the onset. But is this just kind of a lazy reliance upon pushing little levers pre-2020 model by the Fed and not necessarily making an in-context analysis? These are supposed to be the high minds of the economic board making decisions for us at the government level. And it seems like that they're really not understanding the situation. Sorry for the question.
No, but I think it's a relevant question. I think it's a question that we all need to be asking. And I think that a lot of this is they're taking out of the post Great Recession playbook, but this is a different type of downturn. This is basically a forced downturn. And back during the Great Recession, we didn't have the supply chain and the labor pressures that we have now. That those have the labor markets have eroded a lot since then, and we knew that was a problem previously, but it was really exacerbated now. And then we didn't have necessarily the supply chain shortages, because even with the Great Recession, you didn't have countries that were shut down. You didn't have facilities that were shut down because everybody in the facility was sick. And so it's different, and I don't. It's puzzling to me. I think it's puzzling to a lot of people, and I think it's more of an academic approach than a practical approach. And I think that it's going to, I hate to say it, but it's going to be a learning experience, but it's going to be the learning experience at the expense of a lot of people's well-being. Denise, you got a comment?
I was going to say I agree with what Brian said, and I mean, you've always said in these business forums is about the need for creativity, but I think at that level of those decision makings is exactly what you just said. They're stuck and still trying to fix the problem with the way that worked 10 years ago, and because of the complexity of the issues, we just can't fix things the same way we always did.
I
It
agree.
does creates you need the creativity, and they need to look at the situation and say the rising of interest rates is not enough to stave off inflation when the real problem is supply chain. So let's quit trying to fix the only thing that might be politically acceptable to a section who believes that things need to be fixed the way they always were, and understand that I don't care what your political affiliation is, you've got to be creative and look for better solutions. And if those are more business-like solutions than they are political ones, because maybe that worked in the past, that's what we've got to get to.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, like I said, I think it's an academic approach. And, I'll say this on a recorded line, but when have we ever expected the government to be creative, at least in the last 40 years? So they're not searching for creative solutions. They're searching for politically expedient solutions. And essentially what it's up to is it's up to the markets to fix these problems and make these changes. Unfortunately, we've been moving towards a more globalist economy for really the last 40 years, 40, 50 years. And so it's going to take a while for that to shift back. And there are just going to be some pains involved with that. But people did it for the reasons of making higher profits. I can produce something for a fraction of the cost overseas. Ocean freight's cheap. Yes, I don't control any of it, but I can, I'm saving that money, and I could be more competitive, and it makes sense. But the notion of that, well, it gets out of hand, and now I'm dealing with potentially unstable governments. I mean, I've got a country where I have manufacturing facilities, or I have vendors that I'm buying from, and all of a sudden there's a coup and the government gets overthrown and everything. That's a real threat. Or they decide for the pandemic to completely shut down, like what's happened in China, but we don't. And then, so what do I do? Or ocean freight prices. I mean, ocean freight prices went up 10, 20 times. And they're still high. And so that basically negated a lot of the benefit of manufacturing for a lower cost in places. So it's been a way that we've been headed for quite some time, but we ignored the risk because it made sense, at least monetarily, to do what we were doing. It just wasn't necessarily the long-term play. And now I think that we need to consider maybe more of a hybrid model. I mean, maybe you can mix in some low-cost manufacturing overseas with some local supply chain models, and you can use that to defray costs, but not necessarily use it as your cost driver. Go ahead, Rand.
Yeah, I think that if there is any silver lining, that as you talk through this, I have a buddy of mine owns a cooler company. He makes millions of these coolers, and he's been getting them from overseas for quite some time. And because of the supply chain issues, he's looking at local manufacturing. All of these issues are really forcing a lot of the entrepreneurs I know to become extremely creative and really think, well, how can I do this myself? How can I do this without relying on the supply chain or these other people? And so he's creating a manufacturing facility, in our hometown, to be able to kind of take away a few of those layers of the supply chain. And I bet a tremendous amount of people are. So we're bringing manufacturing back into the States, and I think that's a positive. That's a big win.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think it's going to happen, like I said, slowly but surely. It's going to take a while for that because again, you have to build that facility, and the people that are building that facility are having the same problems that you're having with shortages of different things and shortages of materials and labor. So it's going to take a while. What really I hope is that, and maybe this is a silver lining to the long-term inflation cloud, is that it keeps these supply chain issues at the forefront long enough for people to continue to be inspired to build these new facilities and do these new things. Because if everything just goes back to the way it was pre-2020, guess what? Companies are going to move back to the low cost supply chain models because it makes sense and I can get away with it now. And yeah, I had my hiccup and that was an issue, but I'm going to go right back to it because I need to make that money. And obviously I need to make up for what I was having issues, the money that I didn't make previously. But at the longer these things persist and the more issues that you have doing business overseas or sourcing critical things overseas, the more it's going to inspire people to build more local manufacturing and do things like what you just described. So I think that's going to be, it's going to be enormous. But it's good because it's economic growth over here. But here's the other problem: is that yeah, we could bring manufacturing over here. We don't have the people to work in the manufacturing facilities, so we need to be training people. We've in some cases don't have the capital to build the facility, so we need to be able to access that capital. We need to be able to keep cost reasonable. I mean, we want to ensure quality and we want to ensure that our workers are taken care of, that we're a good place to work and people want to work there and people want to be productive. But also we can't have cost so high that they make it prohibitive to do business. And I think we have a lot of factors in this country that contribute to higher labor costs, and automation isn't necessarily the answer because automation is expensive as well. So you kind of run into a catch-22 in those types of situations. So I think we're really going to have to work and really going to have to get creative over an extended period of time to fix these problems. And look, I don't think we're going to get a lot of help from government policy and from monetary policy. I think that is going to create more speed bumps than it's going to create more solutions. That's just my opinion, but I think that's an opinion that's shared by a lot of small and mid-sized independent business owners, because we have a much different perspective on business. We run our businesses much differently than the Fortune 500, which they don't necessarily dominate the market, but they certainly dominate from an amount of money and influence point of view. And so they see things differently. And of course, that method of thinking tends to translate over to monetary policy and government policy. So I think it's going to be very interesting and to see. I mean, one of the things we talked about coming into 2021 and 2022 was that smaller businesses were excited about a renewed focus on smaller businesses. People weren't paying lip service to it. People were realizing how important it was, smaller companies were to the economy. I think that's dwindled. And I think it's going right back to, well, small businesses are a special interest group, just like any other special interest group that's out there. And we're going to pay lip service to it. We're going to do a few things here and there, but we're not necessarily really doing things to improve their environment. I see a lot of government policy shifting back to what it was before. And that's not really necessarily the best thing for smaller businesses. And I think that contributes a lot to the decline in optimism that we have, because I just don't think that we feel that the Fed is on our side, and I certainly don't think that we feel that federal, state, and local governments in a lot of cases are on our side and really doing things to help us out. So I think that does drive a lot. So a couple other things. I think we've talked a lot about challenges and addressing them was a great part of this conversation. One thing that I would like to spend, we have about 15 minutes left. One thing that I would like to talk about is those of us that have participated in these, and everybody on here has participated in at least one. Actually, everybody on here has participated in multiple. Well, except for you, Brian. Sorry, roundtables. So, but what are some of our takeaways, and what are some of the things that we've learned? What are some of the things that we talked about that were really helpful to our businesses and how we're approaching our businesses? Who wants to share?
I would say for me is trying to understand the younger generations better and getting connected to them at their level so that we can help them understand us better. I mean, we need to also realize that the advances in technology and education have shifted from when I was in high school in the 80s. You know, it's a whole lot different now. Technology is making a lot of good changes in my point of view as far as my industry goes. Even with the EVs coming up, it's a big change, but they're just trying to make it too fast. I mean, those changes have to come about slower than what they are right now in order for everybody to keep up, especially us keeping up with the younger generations.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that. And we have talked ad nauseum this year in our roundtables about younger generations, people in the workforce. We've talked about volatility and dealing with volatility in the economy. And I don't see it slowing down anytime soon. And yeah, I would agree. I think a lot of things are being driven a lot faster than they should be driven. And it's not going to be good for us. And I think we're going to get to the point where we tried to do these things, but then we find out after the fact that we really couldn't do these things in the first place. And you've got a lot of wasted effort, and you've got also a lot of unnecessary volatility that's been created for businesses and people as we're trying to, some of us still recover, but also some of us to still navigate this this new market, this new norm, so to speak. So I think that's been big takeaways. Anybody else? I know we got. I know Bruce has been quiet. I don't mean to put Bruce on the spot, but thank you for joining, Bruce. Rand, you have anything you want to share?
It looked like Brian had his hand up for a second. Brian, did you have something?
Go ahead, Rand.
Yeah, for me, I think it's really understanding the importance of the running the numbers and talking through the numbers and what those numbers look like and how to navigate or make decisions within an organization based on numbers. That's what I've learned most from you, Maurice, and that's and how digging into those little numbers. I'm a culture guy. I focus on culture. I focus on people, and we can only do so much so quickly with culture. And there's a lot we can do with our P&Ls and what those margins look like and how we measure them and how we communicate about them on a consistent basis, and then how we use what we've created, which is a lot of scorecard metrics to navigate the business. So that's my big takeaways always from you are how to better increase those margins, how to measure them, those types of things.
Yeah, and I think it's a lot of people look at numbers, and I mean, those of us that have been in finance, and I hate to say it this way, but you can pretty much make numbers say whatever the heck you want them to say. I mean, honestly, I mean, if you want numbers to say something, you can figure out a way to make them say something. And as long as it's justified, it can be justified, then that's, people find that reasonable. But it's really understanding the numbers and putting the numbers in a position to really help your business. And I think that's something that we all need to get better at, because hey, guess what? I mean, we're operating on lower margins. We're operating with a lot more pressures, and we're having to do a lot of different things within our businesses that we haven't had to do before. And if having the right metrics helps us manage that a lot better. Now, Denise, I hate to put you on the spot, but you have a very good commercial for the roundtable. And just remember, this is being recorded, but based on our conversation we had Monday, you have a very, very good perspective on what you get from the roundtable. So would you mind sharing that?
No. Um, because Maurice has been helping us, we're kind of at this point where we're getting larger and wanted to make sure we're growing in the most efficient process and adding staff the way we need to. And I shared with him, number one, the roundtable in whatever format it is in these different communities, though, is the only place that I get as a business owner that knowledge and discussion points with other business owners on these things, where sometimes I feel like I'm the only one having a problem hiring someone. Now I'm sitting in a room with 12 other people who are all having the same issue in different sectors. And it's both given me a place to learn things that I didn't have any other forum for, and also just to know that there are other solutions. Rand may have found a totally different solution in his market, in his area, that I might not have thought about. And so the roundtables themselves, and then also have just helped me look kind of outside the box and look for different solutions. There's some things I'm better at as a business owner now because of topics and discussion points and things that I've learned in the roundtables over the years. So I'm appreciative for the format, because I think it's very helpful. And I also think it's very easy as business owners for us to get down in the muck and too busy in the doing what we do, that we don't pull back and look at that 5,000 foot mark or the 10,000 foot mark and see what's going on as a whole, and what can I do to affect my business going into the next year or 5 years.
Yeah, and that's and I love that that's your takeaway from this, because exactly what you're describing is one of the things that we had in mind when we started doing these things years and years ago, is for people to be able to share ideas with other people that they may or may not be able to share ideas with, but also be able to take that step outside of your business and think about things from a different perspective, because we all tend to get so tied up in basically working in our businesses that it's very hard for us to step back and really work on our businesses. And so that's why we love this forum and the format, so we can do those things and get the ideas churning. And you may not get a specific answer for something out of the roundtable, but what you will get is you'll get the mindset, so you can think about answers and think about solutions to different things. So I love that, Denise, and we're always happy to have you on these.
And I think anytime there are sometimes that I've actually gotten specific answers, but even if I don't get a specific answer, it at least gets me a couple of more steps further down the road towards an answer. And that's been very helpful.
Yes, absolutely. And that's the point. And that's why we like to keep these conversations open and fluid, as opposed to very regimented and in a presentation type of format. So that makes me very happy, Denise. So thank you very much. So a couple other little points that I'd like to make, just as they relate to smaller businesses, that first and foremost, I mean, you look at the waning optimism and you look at a lot of the other factors that I think are indicative of an economy going into recession. But one of the things that we have found throughout all of our conversations over the course of the last 2 and 3 years is that resiliency in small and mid-sized companies continues despite the challenges. The companies continue to be resilient. They continue to want to push forward. Now, I know that those of us sitting in markets here in Texas that are still doing well, it's easy to say that because we are optimistic. Our businesses are doing well. We've got a lot of opportunities on the table. So I know it's easier to say that. But what I like to hear, and this is always the conversation as we start getting towards the end of one year and into the new year, is everybody talks about, well, this is going to be a great year next year. And 2023 is going to be awesome. Heck, we were saying that about 2020 I was saying that 2020 is going to be an awesome year. Now, 2020 was an awesome year in every way except monetarily, but 2020 was a really good year. But the mentality has shifted to more of the next year, and particularly 2023, is going to be a good year because we're going to make it a good year. That whatever happens, we're going to deal with it. We're going to work through it. We have developed that ability over the course of the last few years, and we've gotten much better at that. So as opposed to riding the wave, we're going to do what we can to make that wave work for us. And we are going to make things happen. So as we are approached with challenges, we're going to address those challenges. As we look at the markets and changes in the markets, we're going to look at those as they relate to new opportunities and take advantage of those opportunities. So I see a tremendous amount of resilience with small to mid-sized companies, especially those of us that have successfully weathered what went on during the pandemic years. So I think that's very, very encouraging. The other point to make is that I think you're going to see a lot of markets that are going to be slow, and you're going to see a lot of industries that are going to be negatively affected by economic conditions in 2023. But I think you're also going to see a lot of markets and a lot of industries that are going to be positively affected in 2023. And I think it really behooves us to learn from what we've gone through and learn from the experiences that we've had and the people that we've talked to and the things that we've been exposed to over the course of the last year, and be ready and willing to apply those to the challenges that we're going to face in 2023, because there are going to be challenges. But 2023 is going to be a great year regardless of what happens. Hey, we may be in recession. The overall economy may be in recession in 2023, but we're still going to have great years. We're still going to get through it, where things are still going to be fine, and we're still going to find opportunities, because there are opportunities in good markets, but there are also opportunities in not so good markets. And I think that we're a lot better primed to address those in a much better way than we were before. So anybody have any closing comments, anything else? We're getting towards the end of our time. Anything else anybody wants to share? Mike, you just went off of mute.
You saw that, I thought you saw me raise my hand. No, the motto of this closing remarks is, if it is to be, it's up to me.
I agree.
There it is. So everybody starts off, and if you want to have 2023 be a great year, if it is to be, it's up to me. And you got to get up to show up. I stole those from somebody, by the way. So
you didn't steal them from me. I'm not going to take credit for them. But you're exactly right. I mean, if we focus on what we can control and we don't sweat what we can't, we deal with what we can't. If we focus on what we can control, we can turn adverse situations into good situations. And I think that we've forgotten the notion that we as business owners and business leaders, first and foremost, we are problem solvers. We're going to be faced with problems every day that we're going to have to solve. Being a business owner and a business leader isn't just sitting back and letting your business do something and getting rich off of it. It is dealing with the daily challenges that the business is approached with, and addressing those challenges and leading the business through those challenges. We're just in a situation now more than ever where we're faced with a lot more challenges than we have been traditionally. But you're right. I mean, if it's to be, it's up to me, and it's really up to us. And part of what we'll talk about in January is setting the tone for 2023, because I think that's going to be very, very, very critical. We were able to, the last couple of years, we knew 21 was going to be better than 20, obviously. We knew 22 was going to be an improvement even from 21, but now we're not so sure 23 is going to be an improvement over 22. All of the what's the term? All the chickens are coming home to roost, so to speak. We had a lot of things that had been going on that we knew were going to create economic headwinds. Now all of a sudden they're really starting to hit. And so it was only a matter of time before that happened. So I think that there is a lot of pessimism going into 2023. And it's going to be a great opportunity for us to use the resilience and the improved problem solving skills and the improved mentality that we have towards addressing challenges as we address what's going on in 2023.